There is a moment many working adults experience that feels quietly uncomfortable. You see a coworker, someone with the same job, the same salary, and roughly the same years of experience do something you can barely imagine doing yourself. He just bought a new car, or she just booked a 3-week trip across Europe. Everyone in the office gathers around to look at the photos, asking questions, offering congratulations. You smile too. You say, "That's awesome." But in your mind, a question appears, one you never say out loud. How did they do that? Because when you think about your own bank account, the answer seems painfully obvious. You couldn't take a year off work. You're not even sure you could take a single unpaid month. Not because you're lazy. You've been working for years. You pay rent. You make your car payments. You pay your bills on time. You're doing everything a responsible adult is supposed to do. And yet, when you look at your bank account, you notice something a little unsettling. Your finances haven't really moved forward. Your salary goes up a little. Your living costs go up a little. And somehow, the number in your bank account stays almost exactly the same year after year. A survey from Bankrate found that 57% of Americans don't have enough cash to cover a $1,000 emergency expense, like a car repair or a hospital visit. They would have to borrow money or rely on a credit card. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many people fall into a situation where, on the surface, their lives seem to be improving. Their jobs are more stable, their salaries are higher, their lifestyles more comfortable. But underneath it all, their personal finances are stuck in a dangerous loop. A loop I call the illusion of stability. It's the place where you feel like you're moving forward, when financially, you're actually standing still. Not because you don't earn enough money, but because the spending system of modern life is designed to accelerate alongside your income. According to a 2023 report from Lending Club and PYMNTS, about 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Even more surprising, 45% of people earning over $100,000 per year still end each month with nothing left over. And if you don't recognize what's happening, you can remain in this state for 10 or even 20 years without realizing it. The delayed bills surgery. There's a piece of financial advice you'll hear almost everywhere. Wait until you're financially stable before you start investing. It sounds perfectly reasonable. First, you pay off your debts. Then you build some savings. Then you earn more money. And only after that do you start thinking about investing. That's the plan many people believe makes sense. And ironically, that very plan is what ends up costing them tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of their financial lives. Because in the world of money, there's something that behaves a lot like a utility bill. You can postpone it for a while, but eventually it will arrive. And when it does, it's much larger than it would have been before. Waiting until you're debt-free to invest is often paying interest twice. Most people think about debt in very simple terms. Debt equals bad. Investing equals good. So they choose a strategy that sounds perfectly logical. Pay off all debt first, then start investing. The problem is that time doesn't stand still while you wait. During the 5 or 7 years you spend focusing entirely on paying down debt, something else is quietly happening in the background. The market continues to grow. Compound interest continues to work. But it's working for other people, not for you. Imagine 2 people who start their careers at the same time. The first decides to wait 10 years until life feels financially stable before investing. The second begins immediately, even if it's only with small amounts of money. After 30 years, the second person often ends up with far more wealth. Not because they invested more money, but because they allowed time to start working earlier. In finance, the first 10 years are often the most important 10 years. Missing that window is like missing the first downhill slope of a snowball rolling down a hill. But the story goes even deeper than that. Even when people understand compound interest, they still delay investing. Not because they don't understand the math, but because they're waiting for a feeling. The feeling that I'm finally ready. The problem is that this feeling almost never arrives. There is always something else that needs to be paid first. Rent, car repairs, wedding expenses, children, the vacation you've postponed for too long. Life always provides a reasonable excuse to delay. And that's exactly where the trap lies. In the J.P. Morgan Asset Management Guide to Retirement Report, they present a classic example. If you invest $10,000 per year from age 25 to 35 and then stop, you can still end up with more money than someone who starts at 35 and invests $10,000 every year until age 65. Assuming the same 7% annual return, 10 years of starting early can outweigh 30 years of late effort. Compound interest isn't magic. It's a late fee if you start too late. People often describe compound interest as a financial miracle. Your money works for you. Money makes money. But there's another way to think about it. Compound interest works a lot like a time-based toll system. If you enter the system early, it pays you. If you enter late, it charges you. Someone who starts investing at 25 doesn't have to invest enormous amounts of money. Someone who starts at 35 often needs to invest twice as much to reach the same outcome. Someone who begins at 45 may have to invest 3 or 4 times as much, not because they are less intelligent, simply because time is no longer working in their favor. Data from Vanguard illustrates this gap clearly. The average retirement account balance in the United States is about $134,000, but the median balance for people aged 35-44 is only around $35,000. That difference reveals something important. Most people have saved very little, while the average is pulled upward by a smaller group who started investing early and consistently, which means the biggest mistake in personal finance usually isn't investing poorly. The biggest mistake is starting too late. If the earlier section described the illusion of stability, this section describes the delay trap. And when the two combine, something dangerous happens. You have a stable income, you spend reasonably, you delay investing, and then 10 years pass. Everything still looks stable, until one day you realize something uncomfortable. It's not that you made a terrible financial mistake, it's that you simply started too late. The battle against the consumer operating system. There is something fascinating about money that very few people recognize. You're not just managing your own finances. You're living inside a system that is quietly designed to spend your money for you, not through giant financial disasters, not through catastrophic decisions, but through hundreds of tiny choices every single day. Imagine a completely ordinary evening. You're lying on the couch, scrolling through your phone. You only meant to watch a few short videos. Just a small break after a long day. Then an advertisement appears. A jacket, a pair of shoes, a set of headphones. It's not something you were actively looking for, but it looks pretty good. You tap on it. The product page opens. Beautiful photos. 4, 9. Star. Reviews. A discounted price. And right in the middle of the screen sits a large orange button. Buy now. A familiar thought appears in your mind. It's only a few hundred. You tap the button. 30 seconds later, the transaction is complete. You almost don't even feel like you've spent money. Research from Statista and Shopify on e-commerce behavior shows that integrating digital wallets and one-click checkout buttons can increase order conversion rates by as much as 35.26%. In other words, when the barrier that forces people to pause and think disappears, people tend to spend over 1/3 more than they originally intended. The Buy Now button is a direct attack on your retirement. In the past, spending money required several steps. You had to leave the house, walk into a store, pick up the product, and hold it in your hands. Stand in line to pay. Each of those steps created a small pause, a moment to reconsider. Do I really need this? The internet quietly erased all of those pauses. Today, spending money takes only one tap, one password, one confirmation. Everything is designed to remove friction, and when friction disappears, spending rises. Technology companies understand this extremely well. They experiment with the color of buttons, they test the position of the purchase button, they optimize how prices are displayed, not to help you save money, but to help you decide faster, and the faster you decide, the less you think. The problem, however, isn't a single purchase. No one goes bankrupt because of one jacket or one pair of shoes. The real problem is repetition. A small order today, another one next week, a subscription you forget to cancel. Each one looks harmless on its own, until you look back after a year. According to Experian, global credit card debt has reached record levels. In the United States alone, total credit card debt surpassed $1 trillion in 2023. That number reveals something important about the modern financial system. Banks don't hate you. They just love your debt more than your freedom. The modern financial system doesn't primarily make money when you become wealthy. It makes money when you stay in debt longer. Credit cards encourage you to make the minimum payment. Buy now, pay later. Apps encourage you to split the cost into installments. Loans encourage you to extend repayment timelines. Everything is designed to make an item appear cheaper than it actually is. A $1,000 phone sounds expensive, but if you break it into only $30 a month, suddenly it feels much more reasonable. That's the power of monthly payment thinking. It quietly tricks your brain into forgetting the most important question of all. How much am I actually paying in total? When everything becomes a small monthly payment, you begin accumulating something quietly dangerous. Not massive debt, but dozens of small commitments against your future income. Rent, car payments, credit cards, subscriptions, apps, services. Each one seems small on its own, but together, they do something powerful and risky. They occupy space in your future. That's why many people experience a strange feeling over time. They earn more money than they did before, yet they still feel like they have no real choices. They can't quit their job. They can't reduce their hours. They can't experiment with something new, not because they don't earn enough, but because much of the money they will earn has already been promised to too many things. And that's exactly how the consumer operating system works, not through one giant decision, but through hundreds of tiny buy now clicks. So if this system is that powerful, a reasonable question appears. Can an ordinary person actually fight against it? In part 4, we'll explore an extremely simple strategy, starting with just $20 to $40 per month, that can completely change the trajectory of your finances. The ant strategy for people who feel discouraged. If you've read this far, you might be thinking something very familiar. Sounds reasonable, but I don't have much money to invest. This is the point where many people stop. They assume investing is something reserved for people who already have money. People with tens of thousands of dollars. People with assets. People who are already financially stable. So they postpone it. They tell themselves, when I can spare $400 a month, then I'll start investing. When my income increases, then I'll begin. Historically, the S&P 500, the index, representing 500 of the largest companies in the United States, has delivered an average return of around 10% per year over more than 90 years. But there's a slightly uncomfortable truth in personal finance. If you can't invest when the amount is small, you will almost certainly not invest when the amount becomes large. Not because you lack discipline, but because you haven't yet built a new identity. The amount you invest matters less than the identity you build. Most people think investing is a financial action. In reality, it's primarily a psychological action. The day you begin investing, even if it's only $20 a month, something small but profoundly important happens. You start to see yourself differently. You're no longer just someone who earns money, spends money, and pays bills. You become someone who owns assets. It sounds like a subtle shift, but it changes the way you look at money. A $20 shirt is no longer just $20. It becomes a different question. How much could that $20 become in 10 years? An expensive trip starts to trigger another thought. Do I want this experience right now, or do I want my money working for me? This isn't about sacrifice. It's about identity. You're no longer someone trying to save money. You become someone who invests. And when identity changes, behavior tends to follow. But there's still a major problem. Even when people begin investing, many of them do something that causes them to quit very quickly. They check their account every day. They open the investing app. They see the market drop. They panic. They see the market rise. They get excited. This emotional cycle repeats over and over until they feel exhausted. And eventually, they stop. Forgetting about your investment account can sometimes be more profitable than watching it every day. One of the most effective financial strategies sounds almost boring. Automation. You set up an automatic transfer every month. 20美元, 40美元, or any amount you can consistently maintain. The money leaves your account before you have time to debate it. It gets invested automatically. You don't have to make a decision every month. You don't have to fight with yourself. You don't have to wait for motivation. The rule becomes extremely simple. Money comes in, money gets invested. The most successful investors are not always the smartest people in the room. More often, they are simply the ones who stay consistent the longest. And persistence becomes much easier when it no longer depends on willpower. It depends on a system. That is why the ant strategy, slow, steady accumulation, works so powerfully. Not because the initial amount is large, but because of time and repetition. $20 a month may look insignificant today, but 10 years from now, you won't just have a sum of money. You'll have something far more valuable. A financial system quietly working for you. even when you're not thinking about it. And once that system grows large enough, something interesting begins to happen. Your money starts buying you something very rare. Not a new car, not luxury goods, but choice. In the final section, we arrive at the real goal of investing. It's not about becoming a millionaire at 65. It's about buying back something many people lose during decades of working life. The freedom to say no. According to research from JP Morgan, delaying investing by just 10 years can force someone to work 3 times harder later in life, simply to catch up with someone who started early. That's the hidden price of a late bill that no one ever sends you a notification about. Buying back freedom, the options. If you ask most people why they want more money, the answers tend to sound familiar. A nicer house, a better car, longer vacations. That's the way many of us were taught to think about money. Money to buy things. Money to upgrade your lifestyle. Money to own nicer stuff. But when you talk to people who have invested for many years, something interesting appears. The thing they talk about most often isn't possessions. It's options. The option to take time off when they're burned out. The option to try a new career. The option to say no to a bad project. That's what money gradually begins to purchase after years of investing. Not flashy wealth, but the ability to not be trapped. The goal isn't $1 million. It's the ability to say no to a bad boss. There's a reason many people stay in jobs they don't enjoy. Not because they love the work, but because they don't have another option. Rent still has to be paid. Bills still have to be covered. Family still needs support, so they endure it. They tolerate the difficult boss. They accept the overtime. They endure the quiet exhaustion that stretches on for years. Personal finance changes this situation in a surprisingly quiet way. When you have investments large enough to cover a few months of living expenses, something interesting happens psychologically. You no longer feel cornered. You can look for another job. You can refuse a bad offer. You can take a few months off to think. You don't need to be a millionaire to experience that shift. Sometimes it only takes 6 to 12 months of living expenses invested and stable. That's the moment money begins to do the most important job it can do. Not buying things, but buying room to breathe. And yet there's one final twist many people never notice. Even after they begin investing, they still believe the ultimate goal is a number. 1万美元, 2万美元, 4万美元. They assume that once they reach that number, life will somehow change. But in reality, what changes your life is not the number. It's time. The best investment isn't on a screen, it's buying back your own time. When you open an investing app, you see numbers, returns, growth percentages, portfolio value. But those numbers actually represent something else. Your future time. Every investment you make today is a small promise. A promise that one day you may be able to work less, retire earlier, or spend more time on things that matter beyond work. That's why people who have invested for many years often repeat a very simple idea. Money isn't the goal. Freedom is the goal. The freedom to choose how you live. The freedom to choose your work. The freedom to choose how you spend your time. If you look back across the entire journey of this article, a clear pattern begins to appear. We started with the illusion of stability, where life seems to move forward, while finances quietly stand still. Then came the delay trap, waiting until things feel more stable before investing. Next came the consumer operating system, where hundreds of small clicks quietly claim your future income. And finally, we arrived at a very simple strategy. Start small, automate the process, and stay consistent long enough, not to become rich overnight, but so that one day, when an opportunity or an important decision appears, you can say a sentence many people never get to say, I have a choice. If this piece made you see money differently, consider sharing it with a friend, someone who is working incredibly hard, but still feels like their finances are standing still. Sometimes a small shift in how we think about money can quietly change the entire trajectory of a life.